savvy. So I think starting with the basics is great. So I'll just let you go with what the heck an ordinal is.
Yeah, you wanted to chat, interrupt me if there's a good question that we should address, and then yeah, I'll get going. So I put this little one pager together to help me understand where the conversation might go and to prompt me to make sure I don't miss any of the biggest pieces. So I'll kind of go from top to left to right, all the way to the bottom. But as you ladies have probably heard so far in just, the Twitter sphere, and depending on who you're following and what narratives and, podcasts, et cetera, have been, created in the last couple of weeks, this ordinals and inscriptions aspect to Bitcoin has really changed the way a lot of people, I'm not going to say everyone, but a lot of people have changed their view on how Bitcoin can be used. So obviously it's, the largest blockchain. It's got the monetary properties of decentralization and permissionless that you would ultimately design in something that what was its original use. So now in the last year or so, I'll talk a little bit about the tech, not get into the crazy details of it, but hopefully just kind of address what this new terminology is actually referencing. So if you hear ordinals and you hear inscriptions, you'll understand what people are really meaning behind the scenes. And then we can talk about, what that could mean for Bitcoin or NFTs or creators, marketplaces, all that stuff. Maybe even how we can create our own and get involved, because it actually is not that hard. So, all right, so starting with ordinals. So this is an aspect of Bitcoin that has been a part of the software from the very beginning. So if you can think of, Bitcoin as this massive database, and, each Bitcoin, well, there's no such thing as a Bitcoin, but I'll get into that in a second, but it's all based off of the, Satoshi. So 100 million Satoshis equals a Bitcoin. And if you look into the code, each Satoshi itself has what's a serial number that indicates its uniqueness. So, and the name ordinal comes from the order of which the sats are produced when a mine is blocked. When a block is mined. So, every 10 minutes, a certain amount of blocks, depending on which, block subsidy reward, frame you're in. Right now, it's 6.25 that get created. So as those sats are, brought into existence by the miners, they're actually tagged with essentially like a serial number or an ID, and each one of those is unique. Now, in the past, that really hasn't been, something of interest to anyone. So it was, there's 15 characters, 15 numbers long, and it's like a serial number that just indicates that this is unique. And from the code's perspective, you have to have that for the actual Bitcoin protocol to work. So it's always been there, but now just recently, people have, essentially come up with this theory around ordinals, and the fact that, we've heard the NFT, so non-fungible token. So that the fungibility of something means like one is equivalent to another, and there's no differences. So technically, a Satoshi has always been non-fungible. In other words, no two Satoshis are alike. So if you can think about it, like a good analogy for me is like a $20 bill. So if I've got two $20 bills sitting next to me, and I exchange one with Heather, and I give her a 20, she gives me back a 20, neither one of us is really going to care that, we've swapped $20 bills. The issue is that we've actually substituted two unique pieces of paper, because every $20 bill and every paper currency will have its own serial number. So if you go and look in your wallet and you've got a $20 bill in there, you'll see that there's a serial number. So that actually makes it traceable, unique, and so that you can't go ahead and counterfeit or whatever the case may be. So each Satoshi is exactly like that. So that's the ordinal side. So in other words, the order of the creation of a Satoshi, it gets written at the time of creation, and it has some identifiers like which block and what number of the block and all that stuff. And there's a little bit more to that, but essentially just think of it as a serial number. So you can uniquely identify any Satoshi that's ever been created or ever will be created. So that leads to this inscriptions piece, which is now, because you can uniquely identify any particular Satoshi, you can actually write or inscribe text associated with any one of those outputs. So you might have heard of like UTXO, unspent transactions output. So that is essentially what, the entry in the database to indicate that, Heather owns this Satoshi, or I own this Satoshi. It's in my wallet. I have the public key and I have the private key. So about a year and a half ago, something got implemented on the Bitcoin protocol called Taproot. And Taproot introduced the ability to write code, so, text files or strings of code into one of these outputs, which is a Satoshi. And now what people are using that field for, which at the time of design was not really set to be limited at all. So you can put in quite a bit of data, relatively speaking. And that's where you're basically getting someone inscribing a string of code that represents, it could just be a text field, it could be a picture like an NFT, it could be essentially anything that you can represent in that amount of space with that text string. And then when that happens, now you've married the ordinal, so that serial number for that particular Satoshi, with the inscription or that text. They're now married together. And so now essentially that Satoshi is, although always was non-fungible, it's recognized more as having value over and above just being a Satoshi. So it's still worth, 1/100 millionth of Bitcoin, but now there's, additional text on there that people are recognizing as being valuable. So, but again, 2 weeks ago, there was really no inscriptions. And now there's probably, last I looked, it was like 150 or 160,000 inscriptions that have been done. And, there's an argument for, well, what makes an inscription valuable? The earliest inscriptions, is it the art, is it, et cetera? And then obviously being put on the blockchain of Bitcoin versus say Solana or Ethereum or any one of these other chains, is that the difference between those is where that information is actually hosted. So, you've got the NFT architecture, say on Ethereum, where you have, 1,000 drawings, pictures, JPEGs, and they're hosted, either on a server somewhere or like an IPFS. And then the file that indicates where that is stored, that string is actually stored on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's not actually on the Ethereum blockchain per se. Whereas in the Bitcoin world, this is actually getting written to the Bitcoin blockchain, blocks are mined, nodes run, they download the Bitcoin blockchain, and now everyone has that inscription sitting on their node. So now you've got, and there's no way to censor it, there's no way to delete it, there's no way to change it. So it's forever, and it's sitting on the Bitcoin blockchain, which presumably, if it's the one that wins and lasts, it's going to still be sitting there 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And socially, what is the value going to be of that? Historical, what is going to be the value of that? So I think that's where people are getting really excited. And I'll take a breath there. I don't know if anyone had any questions, but that's basically ordinals, the serial number, and inscriptions, the text that's associated with the ordinals that makes this, what they're calling a digital artifact rather than NFT, which is kind of hard to explain to people, but it's like a digital artifact that lives on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah. Okay. So, I like everything so far. I was putting notes in the chat too, just to like summarize everything you're saying, just so people, because sometimes I feel like when you hear it for the first time, it's hard to soak in. But I do think it's so interesting because I feel like some Bitcoin maxis I've listened to some Twitter spaces, and they're saying things like they do not like that people are creating any different sort of value around a Bitcoin versus it being just a store of value or an exchange of value, right? That they're adding something to this. Have you heard the same thing? Like, what do you think about that?
For sure. My initial gut reaction when I heard this is, this feels like an attack on Bitcoin.
Yes.
So, as the blocks fill up with, what some people may call garbage, then the blocks get bigger. If the blocks get bigger, it takes, it costs more to do a transaction. It takes more memory and more time, bandwidth, et cetera, to run a decentralized node. So you're kind of starting to limit, potentially, this is what I thought at the beginning, potentially limit the scope and the ultimate use of Bitcoin should be a store of wealth, monetary network. And so, yeah, a lot of Bitcoin maxis are definitely worried, concerned. They don't like it. They think it's all just garbage. And so I think that remains to be seen, but the fact is, like, the genie's out of the bottle right now. The tech is happening, and it's happening extremely quickly. Like the other boxes that I've got down here about, wallets are making changes. There's marketplaces like, the new OpenSea is being created right now. The ability to inscribe your own. So when it first started 2 weeks ago, you had to run your own Bitcoin node, and you had to, download the entire Bitcoin node software and the database and everything. That normally takes like 2 or 3 days. And then there was some very, relatively tricky steps that you had to follow to be able to like create or inscribe these things. Well, now, that's all been kind of like pulled back so that you can go onto a website, you can upload a file, you can say, inscribe now, and then pay with a Lightning or Bitcoin payment, and then it gets inscribed, and you say, hey, send it to this wallet. So, and that's, even changing and getting better again within 24, 48, 72 hours, you're going to see that get even smoother. So what is happening is more and more inscriptions are going to happen. More and more people are going to do it. So if you're a Bitcoin maxi sitting there and saying, this is bad for Bitcoin, the reality is now it's like we have to deal with it if you don't like it. And if you do like it, it's kind of great because it's new and it's, it's bringing a lot more attention. Like I was reading somewhere that, 10,000 new, Ethereum-based wallets, Ethereum users came over and started creating nodes and running nodes to get involved with this, because now Bitcoin is more than just money. It's actually, a way of, and most, arguably the most secure way of saving something in perpetuity. As long as Bitcoin exists and there's a decentralized network and the internet and there's electricity and computers, this inscription should or will, survive. So we don't know what the implications are going to be right now, though. I monitor the Bitcoin network quite a bit just to see, how the miners are reacting, what the block sizes are, what the block times are, what the difficulty adjustment is, I guess how it's reacting. And so far, it's actually not too bad. So, and this is, early days as far as I think the data and the compression and the tech around creating these inscriptions. So I think it's going to get smaller, it's going to get faster like anything. And I think it's going to get better. So, the use cases will ramp up. The people getting involved will, exponentially increase. So I think, yeah, the con side is it's kind of an attack on Bitcoin. But, the other side of it is it's going to bring a lot more people to Bitcoin, potentially bring everyone into Bitcoin eventually to see, the value of not only a monetary network, but, a way to, store things extremely securely for the long term. So, yeah, those are kind of the two sides of the talk.
I like it. I was listening to someone from Stacks. She's, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget her name. Maybe Brittany McLaughlin. I don't know.
Oh yeah, she's on the Stacks, I think, foundation team.
Yes. So I met her in Miami briefly, and then I'm in like a group with her, like a group chat with her, and she hosted a Twitter space. And I think overall clearly she's excited about it, but she was talking to someone who maybe was a little bit more of a purist for Bitcoin, but even so, it's hard to deny the fact that it is more attention for it when we're still in this adoption phase, doesn't seem like a bad thing, but okay, cool. Well, then let's talk about, so where do you want to go next? Wallets. So
yeah,
now you have to create a wallet to be able to get your hands on it.
Right. Yeah. So imagine, you come out of this chat and you say, hey, I want to try it, right? It's going to cost, to give you an idea, maybe depending on the network connectivity, like 10 to 30 bucks or something to inscribe something. And then you're going to want a wallet. So similar to like a MetaMask, there are multiple wallets that are available, and that's down there. You can Google it later, but like the Hero wallet, the Xverse wallet, those top two are Stacks wallets. So Stacks is a layer 2 native to Bitcoin, protocol that settles on Bitcoin. So that narrative always been, you can't have, and you still can't have, true smart contracts and DeFi on Bitcoin. So you need to scale up to a second layer. So almost like a Matic on Ethereum or an Optimism on Ethereum. So that was, Stacks was, and has been, creating tech around that and then speeding that up and making it so that, you can do your, like I said, DeFi, NFTs, and other smart contract type things with the security of Bitcoin. So those two wallets have been around for a while, but now they've added the ordinals piece. So you can, and it's changing. Like I was just on a chat or a spaces earlier where they're, you can see your ordinals just like an NFT. You can eventually mint, you can send, you can receive. So all those.
I need a.
The whole thing?
Yeah, because mine's out in the car right now.
Text chatting. So yeah, those wallets are there, and have a look. I put caution next to the Sparrow one. You have to be careful to follow the rules on that one. That's one I've used, but there's certain settings. It's more like a Bitcoin wallet. It's not really on the user-friendly side as much as the other 2 or 3 there. So that's wallet. So you're gonna need a wallet. You're gonna need some Bitcoin, whether it's Lightning or Bitcoin. And then marketplaces have started popping up. So again, like a OpenSea, you've got Scarcity, Ordinals.market, ordswap.io. And their intention is essentially to be the new OpenSea, but for ordinals and Bitcoin NFTs. So the same type of look and feel, you can browse, and they're really sparsely populated right now because I think a lot of people that have ordinals, myself included, are hesitant to start moving them all around, because I want to make sure the tech is like bulletproof. If you can imagine, if I send my ordinal to another wallet and I don't do it just right, then the the Satoshi that holds the inscription, which is basically this NFT or artifact, can be lost. It can be lost to a miner because those sats get actually used for the mining fee or the transaction fee. So you got to be a little bit careful, but those tools are essentially getting put in place now so that, receiving and sending and all that stuff will just be as easy as, MetaMask, where it's like, hey, I want to send Heather this, put in her address, and off it goes. So, so marketplaces right now don't have that much supply as far as what's on there. And so there really hasn't been like a true price discovery for any of these things yet, even though, 150,000, whatever have been created. There's been some, but not that much. And then there's also tools for actually making your own inscription. And this is actually pretty simple. So those 3 there, Gamma.io, Ordinals bot. You log in, you say, okay, what do I want to create? Upload a picture, say the CoinQueens logo, and then you say, okay, I want to save it to this address. So you're going to need a wallet, right? The Hero wallet or Sparrow wallet. Say, I want it to go to this address. And then it'll say, okay, that's going to cost, $5 to pay the, inscribing site and whatever the gas fee is. So that's where you get your, $10 to $30 cost. And then it, goes through and it takes a couple minutes depending on the network and depending on what gas fee you use. Actually doesn't take that long. And then it will be sent, created, the inscription sent, and then it's sent to your wallet. And now you have that, and you can go on, there's like block explorers that you can go and look and see like, oh yeah, I created something. So I think the hype around it right now a little bit is like, the lower the number is, people think the better it'll be, so similar to like ENS names, if you've got like a ENS name under 100 versus under 1,000 versus under 10,000, like those have, more rarity, so more value. So I think people are really like trying to rush into to create things. So I think that's why there's been this big explosion. And then maybe it'll settle down, but maybe it'll go higher when more and more people become familiar with inscribing. So that's where things are now. So
I think it's everyone at first, I feel like the hype was so strong, and maybe it's different from yours because I'm not in as many Bitcoin like groups and universes as you are on the day-to-day, but I feel like the initial surge for the Ethereum NFT degens has kind of calmed down. And I don't know if it's because they've just lost their way, or I hear a lot of them saying things like, oh, it's just like the NFT hype when it first came out, da, da, da. So I'm curious on the Bitcoin side. So you're still seeing and listening to people actively thinking, how do we create something valuable to to inscribe at this point, to have?
Yeah, I definitely see it. I see a lot of creators that are just trying to be, maybe now that the first initial 100,000 is passed, you know, it's almost like they're looking at it strategically and saying, okay, so what are we going to do for our, you know, 100 collections or 1,000 collections of inscriptions or whatever, and trying to get a sense of, you know, which tools to use. I mean, like we're literally talking about 2 weeks ago where most of these platforms were going in one direction, and then the whole narrative switched. And now people are saying, oh, wow, we can do all the things that we thought we were going to do, but now, you know, maybe on an ETH project, and they're saying, oh, we can just have it settle on Bitcoin. So, you know, how do they pivot? And what is their community into? And I think, you know, ETH obviously has been around for a long time. I do find it a little bit comical where there's a lot of like, you know, guys that have PFPs of Bored Apes and saying like, oh, it's just a dumb JPEG, or, you know, but it's on Bitcoin. You know, it's like okay. You guys have probably heard that before as well. So, so yeah, I think there's probably going to be people that were never into, you know, these artifacts and collectibles, that because they were more like Bitcoin centric, that they may say, hey, this is kind of interesting. I don't need another, there's no other token. It's, you know, it's sats and just sats, you know, it's Bitcoin wallets, and it's on chain. So, that'll probably bring in some people like collectors or people with, you know, uber rich Bitcoin whales that say, oh, I wouldn't mind having something in the, you know, of note that was settled on Bitcoin very early on. And I'm sure that will just grow over time once there's, you know, multiple millions of these things, which, you know, it sounds like that's where it's going for sure. What's that going to be worth, and how will, you know, humans like to collect things and be early and have unique things and scarce things. So, I don't think that's going to change. And, you know, the fact that it's on Bitcoin, I think, is just a new narrative that didn't really exist a little while ago.
Yeah. Davita just asked a good question, and Kim, I'll get to your question too, but Davita just asked, so is there no such thing as a dynamic ordinal then? Whereas with NFTs, you know, for instance, we store our files in IPFS, and if we want to update the image or any metadata, it's simple to do. So if you're inscribing specifically on that specific Satoshi, whatever, let's just say it's a Bored Ape, just for topic of conversation. So it's not dynamic. You can't update it, change it at all. It is what it is forever.
It is what it is forever. That's right. So, you know, there's the pros and cons of that, right? So you better know what you're doing, and you better be happy with whatever you inscribe at the time, because it is forever. You can't change it. No one else can change it. And once it gets disseminated, it'll be on 10,000, 20,000 nodes or whatever is all around the world when, you know, those nodes update. So yeah, it's forever. It's, you know,
okay. So what do you think? Let's get into like philosophical here, and then, but,
sure.
So when everyone talks about, and Christina's in here too, and she's doing Edify, her school, you know, her certificates for like, you know, graduation type stuff, you know, for what is it, degrees, that's the word I was looking for. And we talk about driver's licenses moving on chain, like the California DMV is looking at car titles being on chain. And I think they're looking at like Polygon, all, you think Ethereum, nothing Bitcoin related, because like you said, up until a couple weeks ago, no one was able to even play in this game. So would it make more sense to have something soul bound, like they say, on Bitcoin versus a chain like Ethereum?
In my personal opinion, for sure.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so like Ethereum, when you kind of look behind the scenes, you know, the whole thing about Bitcoin is the immutability, right? The immutability of the code, the decentralization of the network, the permissionlessness of, you know, the protocol. So those things come into play, I guess, at the extreme when it comes to Bitcoin. When it comes to Ethereum, in my opinion, again, from a technical perspective, as you've noticed, there are the ability to go back and change the metadata. There is an ability to lose the link to the JPEG, or, you know, the Amazon web server goes down or whatever. So it's a little bit intimidating, I think, to think of things that are forever. Because, you know, that can be exploited, or that can be used in a positive way or a negative way. So I think it kind of like remains to be seen. I think the technology will exist, or become available to do like what's called pruning your node. So you'd be able to, you know, even though the data is literally sitting there, you can, you know, have it, you know, not show or get removed or whatever. But the thing is, there's no real stopping this information from getting out there once it's on the blockchain. And, you know, then they'd have to shut down Bitcoin, which I'm sure they've been trying to do since the inception. So yeah,
Interesting.
it's very powerful. It does have some limitations at the time being. So I've been talking to some founders and they say, okay, so I would like to do a collection of say 100 whatever bears or something. And so they've got these, 100 pieces of art that they want to upload, but there's no real tools right now to make a collection in the same way that you would, like how we would have done, say, for CoinQueens, where you have almost like, you're the owner of the collection, you can manage the collection, you can, review the collection sits on OpenSea. So it's, we're going to get there. I think it's, they're already talking about doing like almost like a parent and child type, interface or connection between, one inscription and a bunch of like, sub inscriptions, and they're all kind of linked together. And so I think it's going to happen. But right now, like I'm in a project and the founder said, oh, I want to airdrop something to, the holders of these inscriptions. Well, there's no mechanism to do that because there's no link back to some centralized server that says like, oh, these inscriptions are part of my project. It just says, 922.
Interesting.
Okay. So there's this need, and there, it'll happen where, you've got this technology that needs, all these, I guess, new challenges are going to come into play. And now, as humans do, they pivot, they make changes, and they say, oh, okay, so I've got the pros of the immutability and the permissionless and all that, decentralization, but now I've got this, oh, it's not really as nice as, the Ethereum experience for the end user. So, and then, the devs are like, okay, so what do you need? You need this, this, and this. The user interface has to be like this. And I think if you go and actually look at some of these tools already, they leaned a lot on what they were doing in the Stacks world, or in Ethereum. And so you have a little bit of that template for what the user likes and what you need in browsing and rarities and all that stuff. And so you can port that over, and then on the back end you have, the Bitcoin blockchain and how do you interact with that. And so these guys are working, I mean, the stuff that they're pushing out as, with my development background, like to do the stuff they've done in 1 or 2 weeks with, if you'd asked them 6 months ago, they'd probably say it takes 6 months, so they're just, and everyone, it's a race. Everyone's putting out some really great stuff. And I think because the demand is there, and interest is there, just seems to be, at the early stages, but it has already exploded quite a bit.
Yeah. So I think at this point we're seeing like the art, the punks, the Pepes or whatever, all the random projects trying to cross over and add something onto Bitcoin. And that makes sense. And I think I would assume they'll eventually run into the same struggle that Ethereum and these other chains have run into, is you have the excitement of the ability to own this digital asset, right? And that on its own was enough value to create, this price that is worth paying attention to. But now I feel like Ethereum and these digital assets have gotten to the point where it doesn't matter anymore. So now you actually have to have something of value behind that JPEG or behind that digital asset. There needs to be a product, a service, or something of value to the human that purchases it. And I would assume eventually Bitcoin could get to that, but maybe not, because it's, of the ability for it to store everything on chain and for it to be such an immutable thing. And so I'm going to ask Kim's question. Kim, I'm going to ask your question, then there's another one. But before I say that, this is so interesting to me. Someone was asking about this CPG, crypto packaged goods. It's a group. They were talking about this new drop they were doing, and they were like, they're non-transferable NFTs. So in my brain, I'm like, well, soulbound, same thing, right? And then they were like, and we are, and these are on Ethereum, are non-transferable NFTs. If for some reason they get hacked or put in, stolen or whatever, we have the ability, talking about CPG, we have the ability to burn that token and replace your lost token with a new one. So someone had asked the question like, wait, if they're soulbound, non-transferable, but you still control them? Like, and then I was like, oh yeah, it's so simple. You just go in and toggle off, whether it's, thinking of, the dashboards that we've used. And I'm like, yeah, there's a toggle. You can toggle it to transferable or non-transferable. Right. And
Right.
so the immutableness of it, if that isn't even probably a word, but is it is not as immutable as it seems for Bitcoin. So I think that is fun to play with a little bit more intensity there. But Kim asked, do you foresee IPFS, which is where the interplanetary file system, where everyone typically stores their images, their videos, the 3D files for NFTs now, do you anticipate IPFS losing share to on-chain storage of images? And is it even, so you've explained to us that Bitcoin does allow for you to have on-chain storage, clearly, because it's written right on the Satoshi. So do you foresee that, or are there any other chains where you can write that directly on a chain besides Bitcoin?
I'm not familiar with other chains that you could write directly on. I wouldn't be surprised if you could, but I would say that if you can do it and you can do it on Bitcoin, it's going to be the place to do it. I don't think this technology, just kind of talking about IPFS and like other chains, I don't think this technology obsoletes Ethereum or Solana or Stacks or any of these other L2s. I think what eventually happens, because of the Bitcoin blockchain size limits, where it moves naturally is it becomes a place of quality or premium inscriptions only. So as Bitcoin gets bigger, it's going to be becoming more popular. It's going to be becoming more used. The fees are going to start to increase. So, if we wanted to do a mint of $50 inscriptions and there's 100 of them or something like that, the fees themselves may be, over time, hundreds of dollars. It could, arguably it could get into the thousands if Bitcoin's, at 500,000 and, the block space becomes a premium. So I think what naturally happens is this is starting to lead down the path of hyper Bitcoinization. In other words, Bitcoin becomes recognized as the most secure chain. Other chains can still be used for, like you were just talking about, like a Matic. You can mint for a few dollars. You can do, multiple thousands of them. And there's going to be applications for that, whether it's, like you said, the value of adding, access to something or part of a group or whatever. So I think there's still going to be those applications, but similar to how Bitcoin is like a store of value, I think the premium transactions that exist within the financial world and in the art world and in whatever the case may be, people will still pay. If I was securing $1 million home and I needed to pay $500 because that's how the title transfers or whatever, and I want it to be immutable, then that's a good, use of funds, in my estimation. But let's say I just had a picture of something and it's not really worth that much and it costs $500 to inscribe it, I may look to another chain to do that. So I see right now there's, as you can imagine, there's good projects and there's, a ton of junk that's getting inscribed. So there could be value in it just because it's a lower ordinal number. So in other words, it was, a lower inscription number. So it's, sub 10,000. That might be a group of inscriptions that are just valuable just because it was not under 10,000. So, and regardless of what it is, and then obviously quality underneath that is going to be like an exponential little, step up from there. But, once you get to the point where it costs way too much, where international banking settlements are happening on chain because you want to settle, whether it's inter-business or, you're moving large sums of money, then you're going to start to price out people that want to interact on the L1 Bitcoin chain. So I think that's where we start to see the hyper Bitcoinization about, it's going to start to push out. And that's kind of like my narrative saying, like, what happens from here? I think the L2s of Bitcoin will become looked at or relooked at, explored, invented, discovered, such as Stacks, where you've got the ability to do smart contracts, which you actually still cannot do, using inscriptions, and DeFi, etc. So people are going to start to see the value of putting these things on the Bitcoin base layer, but maybe take a step back and say, okay, I'll mint 1,000 and I'll just, inscribe my singular, data on chain to anchor it or something like that. So it still has or possesses the immutability of Bitcoin without necessarily having to, write each item on chain. So, yeah, hopefully that answers the question about, like, where things are going and what this is probably going to force,
right. Yeah.
more efficiency, I think.
I agree. And Davita asks, and Nadia, I'll ask your question too, but Davita asks, are there conversations or concerns, and you kind of alluded to this, around environmental impact with the increased uses of ordinal, with the increased usage of ordinals versus NFTs on ETH? So you were talking about size constraints of the block, et cetera. So is there environmental concerns there?
I don't think there's any new environmental concerns.
Okay, fair.
So yeah, the securing of Bitcoin has, been vilified obviously as being a waste of energy. In my mind, it's the only way to prove that, the proof of work system is how you prove that the Bitcoin blockchain is legitimate. There's no way of changing it. And there's also no way of centralizing all power through, say, like a staking mechanism. So I think the energy component of it is critical to the success of Bitcoin and also to the trust that Bitcoin ultimately provides. So that's the energy, debate. But as far as like ordinals is concerned, it's not going to generate, any new energy or any new concerns about that.
Okay, well, that's good. So the conversation remains the same. I'm sure we're all pretty aware of the environmental concerns with Bitcoin in general, and how you have all these other chains moving to proof of stake, et cetera. Now, Nadia, I'm trying to, Nadia said, does it, and I'm assuming you mean the NFT. She says, does it get minted with Bitcoin and gets linked to the same wallet? So saying if you had, let's just say you had a Hyro wallet, it's, Nadia, you feel free to interrupt if I'm saying this wrong. So say you have a Hyro wallet, you go onto Gamma, you create, a CoinQueen NFT using Gamma. So do you mint that when you were talking about the $10 to $30? That's Bitcoin money you're paying in Bitcoin through your Hyro wallet. So you would need to buy Bitcoin. Is that what you're asking? And then it would live in that wallet?
So the answer is like it varies, because some places are allowing you to do this stuff with ETH and then move it to a Bitcoin wallet. So ultimately it gets to a Bitcoin wallet, so that it doesn't go to like a MetaMask wallet. So ultimately you need a Bitcoin wallet. It doesn't have to be the Bitcoin wallet that you originally, say, used to pay for the transaction. And I would recommend that you create a new Bitcoin wallet for each inscription. And you can write a little note to say like, okay, this is CoinQueens, mint 1. And then that wallet is the only thing that's in there are the sats that are associated with, that inscription. And then you do another one, create a new wallet, And those all live under your singular, the pub key of your Bitcoin address. So, but you can send it to the wallet that you used to pay for it. For me, I've done some with minting and paying with Lightning. So, the Lightning address, transfers the Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin wallet address that I entered to receive it in receives the inscription. And then I've also paid with L1 Bitcoin, just obviously takes a little longer for the payment to settle. And then when it settles, you also choose which wallet you want it to go into. So, and I think those tools will get better too, because right now, the last thing, what you want to try to avoid is somehow spending by accident or sending by accident the Satoshi that has an inscription on it. So then you've sent it to the person, or the miner has it, and then they may or may not even know what they have, but you don't have it anymore. So.
I know you made a good example when during a large purchase of a ordinal, you were saying the person who sent it to you sent you way more Satoshis and then like kind of sandwiched the valuable Satoshi, sandwiched it in between all of these millions of other Satoshis, just so that there wasn't a potential to lose the one of value upon the transaction, correct?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the mining fee, the transaction fee that the miner received, you don't want that fee to be, associated with your inscription.
Yeah, that would be not
bit
good.
It's a bit of a bad thing. So yeah, don't want to do that.
Okay, I'm making sure. I think I've got everyone's questions. I'm just scrolling through real quick. Yeah, we did that. Okay, I think. And then so you're now what we just talked a little bit. Was there anything else on the now what the implications, fees, miners? I mean, yeah, you were saying so the fees. So over time, this is just because I don't know this. So over time, you're saying as the network grows, is that what you said? The network of Bitcoin grows. So
Right.
then the fees associated with transacting on it will also grow.
Yeah, potentially,
Okay.
and probably. So, a few years ago when Bitcoin was extremely popular, 2016, 2017, and the last like major run up, fees to do an on-chain transaction were, measured in like hundreds of dollars. So if you were moving $50, you either would wait or you would wait to see, until you had enough to make it worth it, or you would wait and see when the network would settle down, which took, sometimes days, sometimes weeks. So there was a lot of, demand for the block space. Now things have changed since then. Plus there's a lot of chatter about whether or not like the Chinese miners were spoofing the Bitcoin blockchain to like generate more fees, which they had the, predominant amount of miners at the time. So that was just kind of like padding their own pockets. That's, up for debate. But as things move forward, these Bitcoin transactions are commanding more than say your, 10 cents or 20 cents to make a transfer of say a Bitcoin, one Bitcoin on chain, because it takes more space, which takes more memory, which, you're paying per byte. So the transactions are larger. So the transaction fees are larger. And then the miners always optimize for the highest transactions. So they'll run through the mempool, which is, the list of available transactions to be made. And they'll filter on, I just, take all the highest priced ones and I'll skim off the top until you get to the point where you're at 1 sat per byte. And so, 3 weeks ago, that wouldn't have been an issue, but now you're seeing like this, the per sat per byte, like the minimums are starting to rise. And so as Bitcoin gets adopted in its native, use as a monetary system, opening lightning channels, closing lightning channels, doing all this ordinal inscription stuff, I think what you're going to see is the fees will start to move up. And that was my point about, I think we move in towards Bitcoin on-chain settlement will become more of a premium because it is so valuable and it's limited. So you're going to pay a little bit more to be on the top chain, and that's where you want to be. So the implications there could be that miners, and they're starting to see an uptick, miners will start to make more money. So you've got your, public, Hut and Mara and Riot, these large miners are going to be mining, and their fees are going to go up from like, 1% of the reward. So they get the Bitcoin for mining the block, and then it'll go up to maybe 5% of the reward. And, at the height of the boom, it was, you were getting into 20 and 30% of the reward was just fees. That was, a few years ago. So now it's been way down again because Bitcoin usage is down. Also, there's been a lot of technology that has helped with the compression of the size of transactions. So you had a SegWit, you had an adoption. So that's like a technical way to compress transactions and make them cheaper. So a lot of people have been optimizing Bitcoin transactions, which has been great. So now this new application is driving more demand and also driving larger block sizes. So the miners themselves, not only are they making money by mining Bitcoin, and as the price of Bitcoin goes up, their stored Bitcoin becomes more valuable. So as a company, they become more valuable. They'll also be getting more money for the same amount of work. So you might see more miners come on board. You might see, more hash rate come on board, et cetera, because of that. So that's kind of how fees and miners and how people are going to start to get excluded potentially from the blockchain, at least at the layer 1 level, may play out and probably will play out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it at that point, once the fees get to that level or the space becomes minimal, it is going to be, like you said, like a premium. And Nadia was just asked if there's why would you consider a project to do it on the Bitcoin network versus ETH or any of the chains that are free? And I think that you wouldn't. And I think, and correct me or give your thoughts on this also, Mike, but for things like memberships or access or subscriptions, all of these free chains where they're basically settling everything in a browser in a dashboard and then just assigning it to a smart contract on whatever network you're using, say Ethereum, the Bitcoin, it just seems much more, like we were saying, the car titles or the your birth certificates, those sort of things that makes more sense, like that sort of value. But all the others, I wouldn't see why any of that would be moved on to Bitcoin versus the chains that they're operating on now. And I think when I think about, but those NFT projects that are creating on Bitcoin, I think they're purely trying to take advantage of that early, like you said, under sub 10,000 or sub 100,000, those early inscriptions, just for the history part of it, for the value of it being first, right? Like that they're valuable because they are one of the first art projects, digital art projects to be on chain that early. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably multiple reasons why someone would want to be on Bitcoin. Like, let's say, so to your point, yes, be early, have something on Bitcoin. That's definitely something that people would appreciate and really value. And then the other aspect too is, maybe they were just anti-ETH, anti-Solana, anti-shitcoins all in general. And now they're like, oh, okay, I can do it on Bitcoin. I don't have to, kind of think about the two different, angel and devil on my, I like Bitcoin, but I hate NFTs. So I think, oh, okay, well now I can bring them together. There's going to be that camp of people. And then I think from a premium perspective, it may be similar to, like, let's just say you're like a premium artist, like I don't know, Banksy or something that does that, that kind of rogue art. If they were going to produce something of limited run, a one of one, it's like, hey, I'd really love to be immortalized on the Bitcoin blockchain because I know it's not going anywhere. And there's only one of them, and it's probably going to sell for $10 million or the Bitcoin equivalent of that. So I will pay the fees and I will do my best to be there and bring that attention. But yeah, to do anything, for now at least, like the membership stuff and any of the other value things that I think NFTs can provide to creators and people in the space, it won't be on Bitcoin at this point, right? So I think maybe they'll try to do that. They'll say, hey, this is working over here on Matic. Then wouldn't you like to have Matic speed and costs maybe on an L2 that settles on Bitcoin? Like, everyone's going to have their own, spin on it. And to the end user, it may not matter, as long as those chains continue to, exist. I think maybe some people might think, well, if there's going to be one chain that exists, it's Bitcoin, so I might as well build on that one. That's, I guess, up for debate for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's so right. Like, that's so, who even knows? I mean, it's crazy to think that we're having this conversation over literally just, this is all transpiring over the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, it's so crazy. And then Nadia, she said that California will be creating their new driver's license in Tezos. And I've listened to a little bit about why Tezos is a little more functional than Ethereum, but I don't know. I'm not like well versed in it. I think it was something to do with the transparency of the blockchain and the staking. And I don't know, I guess it was a little bit more functional or more transparent than Ethereum is for the purpose of what they were trying to create. But I think Tezos does a lot of private chain stuff. I think their devs or their network does a lot of that private chain kind of things. So I don't know, but I don't know, Mike, do you know anything about why California chose Tezos to do their driver's licenses?
I mean, I don't know specifically. If I made an educated guess, if the government's going to get involved with creating something, then they're going to have that backdoor, kind of like your example earlier, where someone, calls up and says, oh, you spelled my name wrong on my birth certificate or on my driver's license or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, well, we can go and either change the metadata or change the backend or change the server, or I can lock you out because we found out that you shouldn't be driving or whatever. Like, that means that there's some sort of centralized power. Now, maybe one person and maybe a small group, the California Highway Patrol or whatever it is that administers this thing. That's I don't know. It's like a better database, maybe. Why don't we just centralize it on a database? Whereas, the idea of the immutability and permissionlessness of Bitcoin is a paradigm shift away from, the state controlling money and creating money and producing it when it needs to and turning it off when it doesn't like, what you're doing or what you're saying or whatever. So that's definitely different edge cases or use cases for, blockchain technology. And, it would be arguable to me why they wouldn't just do what they're doing now, like a centralized database that they have keys over and the control over and the passwords over, because you're not going to trade a Tezos blockchain, I don't know, driver's license or whatever. I don't know. That's my guess without knowing any of the specifics, but control and the centralization has to be an aspect that, would be, something I would ask as a government entity, producing something, out on the blockchain.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then here, we'll make this our last question because this is a good one. Nadia said, if there's an advantage to being early building in Bitcoin, Mike, then let's do the first female project for CoinQueens in there. What would that cost? I mean, so I think from what you had said, you can only do one inscription per Satoshi, and yet the ability to link, like other images or other Satoshis to that one project is not there yet, but should be forthcoming. And I think he had said like $10 to $30 for each inscription. Is that what you said?
Yeah. And then there's tools. I mean, I think it's coming out today or tomorrow where you should be able to mint a collection at once, and also mint it so that the buyer of the NFT is responsible for the inscription. So I don't know. I literally just heard about this an hour ago, so I don't know like the technical background of it, but essentially it's, you reserve all these artifacts. It's part of a collection. They are, reserved and set aside. And then, Nadia, if you want to buy one, then you log in and, you buy one of the 100 and you pay for the inscription. How that exactly works, I don't know yet because I haven't dove into it. But I mean, those are the types of tools I think that will come out. Even just like anything, just running a collection and having a set list of inscriptions, say 1,000 or 150,000 to 160,000. You'd like them to have them be sequential if you were, creating a community or a collection. Those tools barely existed. They were like one-offs and you had to pay a whole bunch of money, but I think that's also going to change because right now, for instance, when 100,000 was coming, I started spamming the network, right? Because you never know when your ordinal is going to be inscribed with what you've sent. So everyone was trying to get the exactly 100,000. So the network was like extremely busy. We're spamming the network, and I got 100,300, I think, or something. So I missed it by 300. So everyone was like trying to get that same one. So it's like you're not really in control of your inscription number at this point. So I think that'll change too.
It's so interesting. I mean, I don't know everyone, I love the idea of trying to experiment. You guys all know as soon as like a new tool or, something comes out, I'm like, ooh, let's create something on it and see if it works and see how it works, right? It's just fun and exciting to do that. I like the idea of experimenting with the Bitcoin ordinals, but I don't know. It's kind of like the same idea of when I first learned about NFTs and I was like, I could make an NFT project. And then I was like painting and creating all those different layers for the oranges. And I spent like days, maybe weeks, like painting all that and then like figuring out how to scan it and upload it, whatever. And then when I was all done, I was like, well, yeah, it's cute. I like it, but like, why would anyone value this? Do you know what I mean? Like there wasn't any value to it. What I really wanted and what I hoped was when I started hosting those events in real life, that some of our community members would be like, sure, we can like attach discounts or tickets to my box at my suite in Amway or discounts to my place of work or whatever, and like tie them to that NFT. I thought that would be really cool to make like an Orange County, it's an Orange County, like almost like rewards program, right? For owning this NFT. But I think it was just all too new and too much for everyone to wrap their heads around at that point. But I don't know what I think would be of value or what would create interest unless it's just to be the first female project to inscribe on an ordinal. I don't even know what we would inscribe. Like, I have no idea. I'm totally into trying this and creating something, but I don't know what I think would be of value. My logo, I do love my logo. It's amazing. The bee, Jack Pretty.
It is a good logo.
It's the best logo. I freaking love it.
Yeah.
I don't know. If anyone thinks of anything, we can debate this in Geneva, like think of what we want to do. And we could, inscribe away, I guess. That would be fun. But I feel like there's also a marketing aspect to it too. I mean, it's easy for like the punks and the pepes and all of them to inscribe and then have people, you know, purchasing them because they already have a reputation and they already hold some value already. Whereas, you know, we're not like an NFT PFP project or anything like that. I don't know. We can think about it. Yeah. And then if we want to try and be the first, is it Mike? Do you know of any girls that created a project yet on Bitcoin?
I haven't heard of any, no.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Now I really
Let's
want to
do
think
it.
about it.
I couldn't stay muted.
Yeah.
Like the best part of Web3 and tech for me is to like find these waves, and we don't have to even go deep in it. We can experiment it, put something out there. If someone wants to learn, they can get involved and they will learn from us because we tried it, and we just can then jump on the next thing. Like I don't know, I see CoinQueens and Bitcoin, it's like the best combo. I don't know, like when if we use that, like the first, you know, I don't know what's the value we'll be offering or whatever that would be for, but I don't know how much it costs too. If it costs something, maybe we will need to and expect some revenue, but if it doesn't cost much, we can do it just for the sake of doing it and keeping it there. Like the NFTs, like Heather, you have the cutest story of the NFTs you've done the first time on your own. That's amazing, and that's why like you're here. So a lot of us did not do that until we had a workshop or something. We didn't do it on our own. So yeah, it would be, I think, I don't know, I'm so down for this.
Yeah, and I think keeping it small too, right? Maybe we could always just do the CoinQueens logo and just be, you know, because we are one of, listen, there are a lot of female groups, and I feel I am not one to toot our horn, but bye Marquita, good to see you. There are a lot of female projects, and there's so much female empowerment, which is the whole reason that CoinQueens ever came to be digitally and left like Orlando, Florida, is because it was just a bunch of trash people talking, not trash. Okay. That's not nice to say. There was just not a lot of substance, just more of like a show. So, I mean, I do see the value in our group and our women who are actually building like legit businesses. I mean, Edify is amazing. You know, she's going after funding. 3 Spaces also about to start raising money. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just to solidify our place as like female founders in this little crypto world. And we could just do 100 and we can have all the different colors. Cause you know, we have a lot of great colors. You guys that like the original CoinQueens have some really fun colors, like, you know, not just the simple black and white. I mean, maybe we do it like maybe 100 of them. Well, let's talk about it.
Yes, or maybe the new ones would be CoinQueens, and each one's either personal brand or actual brand, like married together in one logo. So that would be the result on Bitcoin, and we can use that even for our, like I would love to have something with MetaHers and CoinQueens, for example, and use in whenever we do something together, like workshops or something. So that would be the representation, and I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's brainstorm on it. Let's think about it. It would be super fun. I mean, now we have a loud enough voice amidst all of the female, like Ethereum projects. There is a few, like I know like GD Anderson from, she's on Solana with Honey Badges or Honey Badgers, whatever. So I feel like we have enough of a voice. I mean, Davida is so strong in the Hug community. She's one of their big leaders. I feel like we could, if we properly positioned it, could get enough attention. It could be fun. And if it amounts to nothing, but just a little bit of, we've staked our claim underneath the, you know, 500,000 mark of Bitcoin, that's kind of cool too. We're just the early day crazy gals playing in Bitcoin.
That's right. I'll give you one example of one project did, where they basically said, hey guys, you can, for instance, you could mint your CoinQueens or mint something that's CoinQueens related. In other words, like, you know, inscribe it on your own. And then you send, say, Heather, your inscription number. And then Heather, you can curate that and say, okay, so these, you know, they're not sequential, but, you know, I got, you know, 50 of them from all the ladies. And now this is the collection. And then you can, you know, it's a bit of a manual process right now, but the tools will come where you'll be able to manage that project and say like, hey, these 50, now they're not, you know, one lady did it at 165,000, another one didn't get around to it to 170,000, but they all look the same, and you as the collection curator can say like, yeah, these are the blessed ones. So I can't just go and create one and say like, hey, let me in. You're like, no, that's not, you're not part of the 50. So one project did that, and then they ended up just like manually grabbing everyone's Stacks wallet, but it could be an Ethereum wallet, and they started airdropping, things to those people using the old way, but recognizing that it was the ordinals version of their group. So one idea, and then everyone inscribed it on their own. So the project itself didn't have to inscribe 50 of them at $30 each or whatever. It was like, hey, everyone, if you want it, it's voluntary, but you come in, inscribe $20-$30, and now and Heather, you just curate it. So that's one idea that seems to work, and everyone was happy with it. It was fun. So, and it was part of the sub. I think they were sub 100,000. So who knows if it's going to be anything, but
yeah. No, I think it's really
idea.
cool. Okay, I like it. I think we think on it. I know Mike is the same, more of like ready, fire, aim, like, so maybe we think a little, because I'll be like tonight, I'll be like, okay, let's just go ahead and put something on, get my ordinal. Like, just because it's fun. I mean, you've done it, Mike. How many things have you inscribed already? It's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun. It is fun. And really, like, don't let the technology aspect of it intimidate you, because it's really easy. That part of it, the ideas around the community and what the art should be, like that would be the challenge.
Right.
But if you're just like, hey, I just want to try something, yeah, it's really easy. Have a picture, have a wallet, go on one of these sites where it says inscribe your own and give it a shot. And for, like I said, between $10 to $30, depending on the network, you'll have an inscription forever on Bitcoin.
I love it. Okay.
So like, for instance, one thing I did a week ago, was I inscribed a note to my kids and put that on the Bitcoin blockchain, love you guys from dad or something like that, and put the date. And so forever, and the kids are like, why'd you do that? And I'm like, well, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll see it and be like, oh, that was cool.
Now, wait a minute. So do you own that sat right now, or did you just like release that sat to the universe? Because that would be kind of cute. Like when people like stamp something or put something on it, like this dollar was in, Florida, and then it ends up in like Washington or whatever, or did you release that sat to let it go?
Well, so it's interesting that I still own the sat, but to your point, like if I spent it, it wouldn't change the fact that as long as I knew the inscription number, they could go and look at that note and say like, oh yeah, dad made me that note. So you don't have to own the inscription to, it's like a JPEG, right? Like I can look at any Bored Ape I want. It's just, I won't be able to buy or sell or, get an airdrop or whatever. But so it's just like, I told my kids, it's kind of like, when you go to the forest and you see someone like MD plus SD, and it's like a little heart and they inscribe it on the tree. It's like that, but it lasts forever,
Yeah.
as long as the Bitcoin network. So you don't have to be the one who did it. You don't have to own it. You don't have to own the tree or the park or whatever, but if you can see it, you can see it. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, fun little ideas like that. And then a bunch of stuff that I degened in that I think might be worth something, at some point, but who knows? Just fun little experiments. But for $20-$30 each, I was like, yeah, why not?
Oh yeah, whatever. That's so fun. Okay, cool. I think that's fun. I think that's a good walk away point on the conversation. And Davida, great point. She said you could almost inscribe for advertising, right? It's like when people, like you said, put any message on your sat and then let it go. It could be the new advertising space if someone develops like a software, an application around inscribing for your sales promotions.
Yeah, it would be like a billboard that exists forever, right? So contact me here, or whatever. Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, cool. This was fun. I'm so glad we did this. I think it just helped put, and maybe you have to like look at this back or whatever, or just keep talking about it. I feel like if we just keep talking about it in the group, ladies, it'll all make more sense as we go. But this is fun. Let's think of something fun to do, just because now it'll be a way that we can, say we're all ordinal junkies and we all know what we're doing. This is fun. Thanks, Mike, for giving us an hour of your day.
You got it.
Yeah, and I'll see you around, ladies. I'll see you in Geneva. That's it. All right, guys, it was fun, and we'll chat later. Mike, we'll be in touch if we need you to help us inscribe anything. Otherwise, I like that idea where we just curate the collection and I can ask you questions about how I can pull that all together, but this could be fun.
For sure. You got it.
Okay, cool.
Take
All
care,
right, Mike.
everyone.
All right, ladies. It was good to see virtually kind of everybody. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay, bye.